there, I'm Clifford Bates, and welcome once again to reading Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. We are continuing Book 5 and turning today to Chapter 7, which is going to be focusing on political justice in a sense. We're following the chapter where we looked at what was not political justice, now to the question of what political justice is, right? Chapter 7, it goes, of the just in the political sense, one part is natural, and the other part is conventional. Now, here, that is, it is legal in accordance with the law, nomokos, which is conventional, or other, it's nomokos. It's that is legal with one part is phusis, and the other part is nomokos, and that is conventional, or what with what accords with the law, right? The natural part of justice, political justice, the natural part of political justice is that which is held, political justice is that which has the same capacity everywhere and is not dependent on being held to exist or not. So therefore, stop clause here. So it is the same capacity everywhere and is not dependent on being held to exist or not. In other words, it's not embodied. It doesn't have to exist or not exist. It's simply that it is has the capacity everywhere. This is food. This is the natural. This is the phusis, right? Um, Semicolon. Whereas nomokos, the conventional part, is that which at the beginning makes no difference whether whether it is thus or otherwise. So the conventional part is it makes no difference whether it is thus or otherwise. But once people have set it down, it does make a difference. For example, the sum of money to offer for a ransom, or to a sacrifice of a goat rather than two sheep, or further, all all that people legislate in particular cases. For example, the sacrifice to Brezda and specific decrees. Now, Brezda was the extraordinary Spartan general in the Peloponnesian War who liberated several Greek cities, most notably Amphipolis, from Athenian control. After his death, he was worshipped as a hero by the Amphipolis. Again, this is the example of this in that sense. So, therefore, let's talk about this. This is that it makes at one thing and then he says that the conventional part is just the rule. Some rule, but then once it's been set up, it matters. At the beginning, it doesn't really matter. I don't want to say it's arbitrary. He's saying, in one sense, he says, which at the beginning makes no difference whether it is thus or this or that, this or otherwise. But once it's set down, it does make a difference. Once it has been established, then it makes a difference. And then the example of this is the specific rulings, what the specific, the sum of money for ransom. There's these specific things. Next paragraph. In the opinion of some people, all just things are of this character, because what is by nature is unchangeable and has the same capacity everywhere, just as fire burns both here and in Persia. Whereas they see the just things being changed. So therefore, in other words, he's saying things by nature are unchangeable. In other words, some people argue that all justice is conventional. It's all this things determined by convention, by nomokos. Okay, convention. Because why? Because the natural things are unchangeable. Fire burns here in Persia the same way. Now, but how the law, the just, things of the just seem to be changeable, right? In this sense, as the second way. But this is not the way it is. Or rather, it is this way in a sense. While among the gods, at any rate, it is perhaps not at all this way. Among us, there is, in fact, something that is just by nature, though it is though it is altogether changeable. Now, this is the famous line that I want to say not Newell, but there's back in the 1970s, um, a Phronesis magazine had a classic article about natural justice. I just looked it up quickly. It's J.J. Mulhern's 1972 Phronesis, Volume 17, which he looks at this passage at 135, around A5, right, about the question of this changeability of things, and that this is a big question. That this idea here, that the idea is that in terms of the gods, there is this unchanging character. But in human things, the natural has a changeability. This is the difference, this is the difference between the true what is the at the level of theoria, or theoria, and we see this in book 6. Theoria deals with the unchanging. It is true or false. It is simply true and true false. It is unchanging. The things are or not. Okay, there is no changeability. But the realm of praxis, well, things can be otherwise. Okay, things are they are or they can be otherwise. Um, uh, um, there are or there are not, or they have the possibility of being otherwise. And this is the level of praxis. This is why the just at the level of life and level of praxis, unlike the level of the gods are unchanging. But the level of us, that there is changeability in this, that there is a just by nature, though it is altogether changeable. Nonetheless, in one respect, it is by nature. And in another, it is not by nature. So there's this double sense, that there's one sense that the justice, this disjust in this sense, is by nature. It's nothing. There is this just by nature, even if it's changeable, right? There's still this nature. But in another sense, it's enactment. This is what we say the distinction between law and justice is, right? Law is always going to be the grasping and the embodiment of what the just is. And this is the conventional way. This is the nomos. This is as he said earlier in the previous thing, the anomikos in that sense, right? This is that what is by nomos. Um, the same distinction will apply also in other cases. By nature, the right hand is stronger, although it is possible for all to become ambidextrous. So that therefore certain things are stronger, but it's still possible that through habit training you can become ambidextrous, right? So therefore, that is the whole point. That this is that even though nature has a rule, that man's no, customs, habits, and nomos, right, can shape things in certain ways. As for the things that are just by agreement and in reference to advantage, right, the things that are just by agreements, what we agree to, and in reference to advantage, what is good, what is beneficial, they are like measures. Okay, the idea is that therefore things are just are by agreement or things to advantage. They're like measures. The measures for wine and corn are not everywhere equal. Rather, where wine and corn are bought, the measures are greater, and where they are sold, smaller. Right. This is the idea. The measuring and things. Sometimes that when they're bought, the measure is greater, and bought they're sometimes they're smaller, right? And similarly, the just things that are not natural but human are not everywhere the same, since the regimes are not either. So remember that even though the natural things that are not natural but human, in other words, the just things that are not in by nature but depend upon human things, are not going to be everywhere the same because regimes are not going to be everywhere the same. And everywhere there is only one regime that is in accord to nature, the best regime. So therefore, in other words, this is a very point that only the regime that's in accord to what is natural nature, what is just by nature, is the best regime. So everywhere, the only regime that is in accord to nature is the best regime. And the question is, does that really can that exist, or is it very unlikely to exist in the sense? So therefore, that's a very problematic. So the Socratic would argue that the Socratic or Platonic position could be that the just regime could only exist in speech. The Aristotelian position is that it may exist in practice, but it's going to be, and there's going to maybe multiple types of variations of what is just, but it's going to be unlikely in that sense, or it's always going to be problematic in that sense because of the changeable nature of things. So, and this is how he ends that line about that even though there is going to be a idea that, in other words, just things are not, and similarly, the just things that are not natural but human are not everywhere the same, right? Since human and it's tied to, and since the regimes are not either, but everywhere there is only one regime that is in accord with nature. That's the best regime. Each of the just and lawful things is related to the various acts that accord with them, as universals are to the several particulars. In other words, for each of the just and the lawful things is related to the various acts that accord to them as universals, right? Are as universals are related to the several particulars. Okay, so as universe, as lawful, in other words, the just and lawful things are related, as the universals are related to the particulars, and that's the correct. Again, that's why I think this is the each of the just and lawful things are related, and I think the brackets here may not be at all completely useful to the various acts of the accord to each to the various acts that accord with them. Yeah, I just leave the Greek. Each of the just and the lawful are related, right? As the universal are to the several particular. In other words, the universal into particular things. In other words, it's like the particular things are embodied are in, instances of the what is that at the universal level, and the lawful things are particulars of what is just, right? For whereas there are many particular acts, each of the just and lawful things is one, since it is universal. So therefore, the just and the purely lawful are one in that. And again, this is a weird sentence here because for whereas there's are many particular acts, the act that is, in other words, um, there are many of these particular acts in that sense, but what is just and lawful is just one, right? Since it is in accord with what is universal, I think, in that sense. As an act of injustice, now this is elsewhere treated it as wrong, ademiche. So he treats it as, in other words, an act of wrong, an act of harm, an act of injustice here, but it's really translated elsewhere translated as a wrong, a dikeme. So yeah, it's injustice in that sense. Could be a wrong, an act of or a wrong, or an act of injustice differs from the unjust, and and an act of justice differs from the just. So therefore, there is a, in other words, a wrong differs from the unjust. This is another point about this. That they differ. From what is unjust is by nature or by enactment. So something is unjust is either by nature or an enactment. But this very thing becomes an act of injustice once it is done. So a wrong is becomes an act, but once it's done. Yet until what is unjust is done, it is not yet an act of injustice, though it is unjust. The thing that is to be done is undone. So it's not injustice until the thing is done. The act is wrong. It is unjust, an unjust thing, uh, uh, an unjust. The wrong or the thing that is unjust. That, in other words, that an act of injustice differs from the unjust as a just. In other words, the just, an act of justice, the act of something, the thing that is act, the individual embodiment of the act, the act that is done, is different from whether the question of being what is just and injustice. Now, it is unjust, but this is wrong. But there's no injustice if it's not done. If it's, in other words, but this very thing becomes an act of injustice once it is done. So once you do it, then what is done is unjust. Yet until what is unjust is done, it is not yet an act of injustice, though it is unjust. The case is similar for an act of justice, though this is more commonly called just action. Again, this is diopragmata, which is an act of justice, whereas an act of justice, dichomonia, is a correction of a. So this word, diomea, dichomea, dicho, la capital O, so long O, mega mosaico, ma, is a correction of an injustice. So this is just really the just act. This is a correction of an unjust act. So the difference of this. So though this is more commonly called a just action, a just act, or an act of justice is a correction. So he's giving us a legal the change of the two different meanings of the same term. And the act of justice here, the case is similar to this. So therefore, that is what is that the just thing itself. That thing is not. In other words, if it's not done, it is not yet justice. Once it's done, if you do that thing, then there is justice. But if it is that is just and is not yet done, it is not yet justice. Okay, you understand? This is the same thing in this is the logic of what is done here. In reference to each of these, we must examine later. In reference to each of these, we must examine later what form it takes, how many forms there are, and with what sort of thing each happens to be concerned, right? Chapter 36. Now, but this is interesting. Here is where Aristotle does something strange. He says we must do this, but as he notes here, Aristotle does not take up this discussion, this distinction, does not take up again this distinction he makes here. So this distinction that he makes here is just left for us to think about. And we should think about this. He himself doesn't think about it. He doesn't give us he doesn't return to this question. So there's two arguments. Is this something just brought up for a particular reason in the case of the argument here and never really seriously addressed? Or is this something that we should confront ourselves and that this is a problem that we will always have to confront, and he doesn't is unwilling to kind of answer this because he feels that there's no real satisfactory answer, or that any answer he gives may mislead or cause harm. Okay, that's the argument one way or the other. So let's stop here. If you have any questions, and this is where you get the question of the just regime is brought up here. You get the question of what is by nature just and what is by convention just. this is that chapter in here, chapter 6, where we get a a little frustration of what was called right, what is right by, what is just and right by nature. In Aristotle, this is the continues some of the thing that was 2 chapters ago in chapter 5. So let's, if you have any comments, questions, or issues here, please put them here. And this has been a difficult chapter. I admit that, and it's frustrating in this sense. This chapter is a very frustrating chapter, both in the Greek, um, uh, and also misleads people because of it. And therefore, there's a whole debate about how this is understood. Some will argue this is natural law teaching. Others will argue that no, there isn't. It's a complicated question. So please, if you have any questions here, it's understandable, and if I get them, when I see them, I will respond to them. Another thing here is, if you like the chapter, hit the like button. Help us grow, help the channel grow, help the thing do it. Share it far and wide. Put it in your social media. Share it in your social media. Help people understand this. If you've not subscribed, please subscribe. It helps. So the more people subscribe, the more options we get in this in terms of things I can, questions of monetization and ways that it can help me out and help perpetuate the channel. Another thing, and if you know people who, please mention the channel to those out there and encourage that are interested in these kind of themes and topics, and encourage them to just come visit us and subscribe. Another thing you can do is, well, if you didn't like it, you could always say thumbs down, but explain why. Explain why in the comments. So that, in other words, and this way we can learn from it. This is, if you have something substantive that's wrong, and I did something wrong or something like this, well, you say why, and we can learn. If you just say no, no one knows what the reason is. So please do give us substantive criticisms in that sense, and others can learn from it too. Not only I, but also others. Again, this is why I do this thing. It's not just for glory of myself. How wonderful I am. Worship me, worship me. But it's educational. This is an educational activity in that sense to help people, and particularly study with these important texts. So, those of you who want to know more about me and follow me on social media, you can do so. The links are below. Want to know about me as a scholar and as a researcher, and the things that I do, research and things like that, you can follow the links below that, below the social media links. The academic social media links are there. And then if you want to help me to do what I do, you can do so through Patreon or Subscribe Star. I haven't said this in a while. You can always buy me go look at my academic social media, find that, and send me a Google card or an Amazon gift card or something like that. I'm joking, but no. I mean, really, this is. I don't have. I'm not. I don't. We don't have enough subscribers to get the money dish out there. It's like, gift, please, gift. I feel like one of the Dixon Dick. Dickens character, more please. This has been crazy. So if you can do that by subscribe to RP, if you want to help, and please do so. Another thing you can do is you can buy one of my books listed below. Amazon, buy your bookstore, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, whatever online bookstore. So either you go to your bookstore and order it to your bookstore or online bookstore. If you want to really help me, and if you're going to buy it for your friend or yourself, and those of you who are going to be studying the politics, reading the politics and studying it, maybe you would like, it would be a good idea to have a guide, and you can get such a guide by buying my notebook for Aristotle's Politics, published through Lulu. I didn't like, I published it for Lulu because it was cheaper. I mean, 2 or 3 there was a textbook place that wanted it. A couple of them asked to it and would have edited it better, and probably, but it would have been 5 times more expensive. I mean, one place wanted to sell for $110 a textbook. And I was like, no, no one will buy it. Then this is I don't understand why they do that. Um, so please go buy a copy. If you're gonna buy that copy for a friend or yourself, please think about ordering it from Lulu directly, because if you do that, I'll get the money, the profit that the bookstore gets. Okay, so please, that's one way you can do it. That's enough. I talked along. Next time we'll see us. We look at chapter 8 of Nicomachean's book, Ethics, book 5. Take care. See you. Have a good day. So long.